am currently in an airport for a very specific reason because I got an important message today that you are very early. You are extremely early. In fact, you're earlier to Bitcoin and you're earlier to space travel and Starship than I am early to my flight. It's currently very empty here for the flight, but since I'm here and I've got some time today, I want to talk about the future of travel, the future of transport, because I don't believe it's just airplanes. I believe we have so much more in front of us in the future. I think Starship is a really key critical component of that. And so in this video today, I'm going to discuss Starship. I'm going to discuss how to get rich from Starship, how you can make money on Starship, right? We all have seen Starship. We all think it's really cool. But a lot of people are wondering, how can I profit from this amazing innovation, right? And it's actually very surprising. Most people think they can't make money from Starship, but I believe you can. And so in this video, I'm going to break down why. So first of all, we have to define what we're trying to do. The first goal is to get rich from Starship and from innovation like Starship and the other things that are being developed by the billionaires and by the other people that are innovating, and of course the engineers, right? The engineers are the ones building the world, not the money managers, not the people that simply move ones and zeros around on the screen. It's the people producing stuff, right? So before we get into actual step-by-step actionable things to do with how to leverage Bitcoin to get rich from Starship, we have to first analyze Starship and why it is special, why it is important, and why we're talking about this specific innovation at all. I think this is super cool. I've been watching the Starship progress for many years now, as probably most of you have been too, but we have to talk about why this ship is insane. It's absolutely insane. The amount of power this thing has, the potential of this thing in the future, and what it's going to do, right? This is the fourth attempt, right, that you probably just watched. I'm recording this just before they're about to launch it. I don't know yet at the time of recording if it's successful or not, but whether it is successful or not, the trajectory is still the same. The progress is still happening really quickly. Elon Musk has talked about potentially having the first attempts of catching the Starship, which is just crazy that we might be able to catch this thing as soon as this year, either in a virtual landing site or maybe potentially an actual one in the next couple of years. But let's talk about why is this different. We've been to space before. We've been to the moon before. What makes Starship really unique? Well, to answer what makes Starship really unique is this design right here from SpaceX. What makes Starship unique is not that it's a rocket, right? We've done rockets before. What makes it unique is this thing is freaking huge, right? It's freaking huge, and it can transport a massive amount of cargo to orbit, right? Or at least that's what it's attempting to do, and like a significant amount more, right? And oftentimes when we look back at the past and in history, the moments where things become economically viable often are just as important, if not more important, than the moments of first discovery, right? Yeah, sure, Christopher Columbus, in 1492, quote unquote, discovered North America, but there really wasn't any amount of significant settlement for literally hundreds of years. I mean, think about that for a moment. From 1492 until, let's say, the 1600s or so, there was not significant development, right? It was over 100 years, maybe even 150, 200 years, depending how you want to define significant settlement. But it was just as much time between Christopher Columbus, quote unquote, discovering America to the first significant settlements. That same degree of time, 150, 200 years or so, is very comparable to the entire lifetime of America as a country, right? 249, 250 years or so, right? I mean, that's something really to think about. That the vast majority of time in human history, we don't have the innovation. And then a significant period of time, we have the innovation, but it's not yet profitable, right? We had gunpowder for centuries. Gunpowder was used as medicine before it was understood to be used as a weapon of war, before it was economically viable to be used as a weapon of war, right? So just because innovation is here and it hasn't been used yet does not mean that it's not going to be in the future. And I think we have something very similar here to rocketry and space. We've had capabilities to go into space for decades, right? Obviously, in the 60s we had the space program, the Soviet Union, United States, but we really haven't gone back to space. Why? Because it's not economically viable. The only legitimate use case for going to space is for experiments, or it's for scientific exploration or curiosity, right? In the same way the explorers explored the Caribbean and the Americas, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not economically scalable. That is what this ship is doing. It is economically scalable, or it is at least attempting to be economically scalable, unlike everything else before, right? I think we can make the same metaphor here with flight, right? Flight was possible for a few decades before it was commercially viable, right? The Wright brothers, of course, North Carolina had their first flight in, what year was that? Someone put it in the comments. 1909, 1907, something like that. The first decade or so of the 20th century, right? They discovered flight, right, with their very primitive, well, now primitive, plane, right? And people thought, well, first people thought, oh, the plane would never take off, and then once it took off, people thought, oh, it will never be economically viable. It's too expensive, right? I'll just do the car. Henry Ford's car thing, that's really taken off. That's a big deal. Well, the funny thing is that the same people hating on the car 20 years earlier or were hating on the plane, and then of course the plane took off, and now here we are where it's commercially viable. And it's so viable that you can have an empty airport like this, and yet somehow airlines still stay afloat. Obviously, there's fiat incentives and bailouts involved as well, but fiat shenanigans aside, this is what causes mass adoption of air travel. Economic viability. This is what causes mass migration from Europe to the North American continent. Economic viability. And that's what we're looking at Starship here. This is why Starship is as big of a deal, in my opinion, as the early days space exploration. Not that those weren't important, and not that it doesn't have to be Starship itself. It could be a Starship copycat or lookalike. But what this rocket is trying to do is fundamentally different than these other rockets. It's not trying to do something new. It's just trying to do it more efficiently. So let's go to this chart here, looking at mass to orbit, talking about that efficiency, okay? Regarding that efficiency, okay, look at the bottom left, that tiny little darker blue bar. You see that? 15,517 tons. That is the total mass to orbit to date. Okay, that's really important. Mass to orbit to date, 15,500 tons, okay? Now, these three bars on the right obviously are theoretical. They've not occurred yet. However, this is, a chart from Elon Musk and SpaceX giving just a thought experiment of what we could potentially be looking at, right? The total mass per Starship after 1 year of operation, launching 3 times a week, not per day, per week. That alone could be equivalent to the entire history of mass to orbit for the planet. One of these ships, okay, one of these ships for 1 year, operating 3 times a week, because it's reusable, unlike ships of the past, can potentially get more mass to orbit than the sum total of human progress of getting mass to orbit to space thus far in history. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So here, let's expand on it a little bit. Okay, let's say it's not 3 times a week. Let's say it's potentially 3 times a day. This is something that Elon Musk and SpaceX are really trying for. Are they going to get that soon? No, probably not. It's going to probably be years, if not many years, until that happens. However, the fundamentals for that future are being built now with these Starship test launches, okay? And then let's do the math with that. With 1 year, per Starship, okay, for one ship launching 3 times a day, that is literally 6 times as much mass to orbit, to Earth's orbit, per year, greater, 6 times greater than the sum total of the world's output of mass to orbit to date over the last 70 or 80 years, right? Okay, and again, think about that. For thousands of years, no matter how much technology humans had, they could not get a single ounce to orbit, right? In the Stone Age and the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, right? Even in the early Industrial Revolution, we could not get 1 ounce to space, right? In the same way, going from 0 to 1 is often harder, or it is harder, exponentially harder than going from 1 to 10. In the same way, going from 10 to 100 is way easier than going from 1 to 10. That's what we're looking at here. The first explorer going from Europe to North America is exponentially harder than the next 10 explorers. And then the next 100 explorers after them is exponentially easier, right? And that's what we're looking at here. It took thousands of years for humanity to get the first ounce of mass to orbit, to space, and then suddenly now we're at 15,500 tons. Okay, you talk to people from 200 years ago and tell them we can somehow get almost 16,000 tons of mass to orbit. They want to understand how you could possibly do that, because they couldn't even have a hope and a prayer of doing 1% of, or 1% of a ton, or 1 ounce to space, right? And we've already done 15,000. And just with one of these Starships, 3 times a day for 1 year, is 109,000 tons to orbit. Again, 6 times the sum total of human history. Now, does that mean that it has to be 3 times a day? No, maybe it's 2 times a day. Maybe it's 3 times per week, but over a couple of years, right? Whatever the case, even if you want to be extremely conservative, we're looking at something that could be very significant here. Now, let's look at that bar on the far right there. What is that giant monstrosity of that blue bar there, right? That is the total mass of 10 Starships after 1 year launching 3 times a day. That's 1.1 million tons to orbit, mass to orbit, annually. Okay, think about that. Okay, yeah, sure, that's Moonboy. Okay, yeah, sure, Elon Musk is probably ahead in his timeline, as he always consistently is, right? You can be realistic while still having to recognize this is absurdly optimistic, right? Okay, what if 10 Starships, do that many launches and it takes 2 years instead of 1 year? Okay, still, that is many times more mass to orbit than all of history combined, right? Even if they're off by a factor of 10, right? Even if it's only 2 Starships over the course of 5 years with 2 launches a day, no matter how you do the math, whatever the case, we have less in common with the future than the past. We are probably going to be sending more mass to orbit from 2025 to 2035 than the sum total of the world up to the state so far for the last 80 or so years, right? Absolutely incredible, absolutely monumental. Now, what does this mean for profit? What does this mean for getting rich from the Starship, right? This means obviously surely there's got to be profits, and obviously surely we can capitalize on those profits. Let's discuss that a little bit more. Let's look at the profitability of a competitor. Okay, so this design we're looking at here is 3 things. On one, we have a passenger jet on the left, far left, that grayed out little symbol there, right? Again, I don't have a plane outside right here in front of me. Right now my plane's not here yet because, as typical with Bitcoin and life, I'm early in general. So there's no planes right here. Well, there's one way over there on the other side. I guess you can't see that, but most of you watching have surely been on a plane, so you know how big those things are. Okay, look at this middle rocket here. What is that middle rocket? That middle rocket is NASA's Block 1 Space Launch System, otherwise known or commonly known as NASA's SLS system, okay? That rocket is huge. Okay, look at that compared to the passenger jet here. Okay, it's it's close to 2 times longer, or I guess tall, because it stands up, it doesn't lay down like a plane. But look at the Starship. The Starship is even bigger, and not only is it longer, but it's girthier, right? it's got way more volume in it, right? I mean, look at the super heavy fuel tank, right? The bottom 60% or so of the SpaceX rocket. Okay, that alone just visually is striking in its size comparison to the size of the SLS system, right? The SLS system has the orange central fuel cell, and then of course you have the 2 on the right. Now the 2 on the right are reusable, but the majority of the rocket is not reusable. It only has a 1 use case. Yes, there are parts you can reuse, and yes, of course, once you use it the one time, you might be able to use the raw materials, which helps get down the cost a little bit. But again, let's get back to profitability. I'm a supporter of NASA. I appreciate NASA. I'm not disrespecting NASA here, but it is just the truth that NASA does not have the same economic incentive to be profitable, right? If NASA is not profitable, the government can just print money or raise money or create bonds to back NASA and continue the program, right? If Elon Musk cannot profitably have this rocket, he goes bankrupt, right? That's simply why we're seeing this occur, right? It's the same thing with natural selection in nature, okay? You see changes in organisms and changes to their environment, right? When the environment has a forcing function on an organism, it changes, right? When a predator, is coming after a certain kind of prey, that prey will do what it can to survive, right? In the same way, the capitalist system, the free market system, is incentivizing Elon Musk and Elon's team at SpaceX and the engineers. They have to be profitable. The NASA engineers don't have the same economic incentive. So let's go through these numbers real quick. NASA's SLS mass to orbit projection is roughly 95 tons. That varies a bit. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. They have different variations. I know I'm going to get comments from the rocket nerds and down below, but roughly speaking, it's 95 tons optimistically. Okay, the projected cost is $4.1 billion per launch for the NASA SLS system. Okay, and again, there's 1 use case. Maybe you could argue that's theoretically 1.5 use cases, because you can reuse a third of the rocket or whatever repeatedly, but still the vast majority of the rocket, the vast majority, in principle, essentially it is 1 use case, right? Even if you can reuse a significant portion of the rocket, you are not going to be having multiple launches in the same week, let alone in the same day, probably not even in the same month or 6 months, given how slow the government is. But just for the sake of simplicity, we'll say there's only 1 use per rocket. Okay, that's $4.1 billion per launch. Okay, $4.1 billion per 95 tons optimistically to orbit. Okay, and that means there's a cost per ton to orbit of approximately $43 million. Okay, you can have tens of millions of dollars and you could still not afford to buy 1 ton worth of cargo and sending it to orbit via the NASA SLS system. Now, again, let's compare this to SpaceX rocket. Let's compare this to Starship. Okay, Starship Heavy's mass to orbit, 5 years, 7 years ago was projected to be about 130, 150 tons. Now, because thanks to the Raptor engines and, continuing to upgrade them, and definitely it's amazing if you ever look up the Raptor engines. It's absolutely incredible what we're looking at with the amount of improvements and simplicity that they have for those, right? It's truly astounding. I won't get into that. That's a whole another nerd rabbit hole. But they're getting more and more efficient with their Falcon rockets, right? Being more efficient, and they can have now potentially up to 200 tons. Elon Musk has even talked about potentially 230 tons per Starship Heavy. Now, again, I'm not using Elon's projection of what could be. I'm sticking more towards what it seems to be now, which is approximately 200 tons potentially of mass to orbit. So that's twice as much mass, aka cargo, aka humans, aka satellites, to orbit and then the NASA system. And here's the even more important part. Elon thinks that the cost for a single launch for the Starship could be as low as $2 million. Okay, $2 million is still a big number. It's still hard to wrap our human brains around. However, comparing $2 million to $4.1 billion is a huge, dramatic difference. Like it is almost impossible to overstate the economic significance of that, right? Okay, imagine, Christopher Columbus's voyage to North America costing $4 billion, and now you're a pilgrim, and it's going to take you literally 1/2000th of the cost to go over, right? Like that's the kind, that is what gets the mass adoption. That is what gets the people going, right? Now, in my little chart here, the visual is not of mine, but the numbers down below are the compiled numbers that I found putting them all together here. Now, of course, $2 million, again, that's Elon's number. Again, Elon can be typically a little too over-optimistic, and of course, also you have the fixed cost of building the ship in the first place. So if we assume that's anywhere from $2 million up to $6 million per launch, okay, just to have a range there, we really don't know yet. Okay, but again, how many uses can we get from this rocket? Well, they project, again, that we could potentially have 3 launches per day, and I'm putting in an arbitrary 10-year lifespan of the rocket. It's hard to know, right? Maybe a single rocket will last 20 years. Maybe a single rocket will only last a few years. Okay, again, there's a huge amount of variance here, and I want you to take it with a big grain of salt. I'm not saying this is an absolute. I'm trying to say these things to get a conceptualization across. And the conceptualization I'm trying to get here is if there are 3 launches daily per Starship rocket, and the rocket has roughly a lifespan of 10 years, then that means that there could be potentially almost 11,000 uses per rocket. Okay, again, compare one NASA rocket that you can use once to get under 100 tons of mass to orbit versus a second ship that you can use literally 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, maybe even 10, 12, or 15,000 times that costs 1,000 times less to launch. You begin to see the importance of the ships. You begin to see the importance of the free market compared to these government rockets, right? So literally, the Starship potentially, eventually down the line, could be 1,000 times cheaper than these SLS rockets or other rockets that other major governments are doing. Now, of course, this is still not here yet, right? We've not seen the Starship appropriately land yet. However, I remember when 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, people were saying this Starship would never be built. It would never be built. And yet, it's here. We've seen 3 launches at the time of recording. You probably have already seen the 4th one at the time of you watching this. Maybe even you're watching this in the farther future. We've seen 5, 6, 8, 10 different tests. But whatever the case, the rocket is here. It does work. And we're seeing incredible, rapid improvement in this. And it's just a matter of time until the rocket is 10 times cheaper than the NASA rockets. And soon after that, it's going to be 100 times cheaper. And we don't have to get a 1,000x cheaper rocket to have significant implications on the world. It can just be 100 times cheaper and still have significant implications. And again, this might be too conservative. And a long enough time horizon, going out maybe 10, 20 years, this could even be too conservative. So what are some of those use cases? So, of course, there is the moon missions, right? NASA does want to go back to the moon. There are opportunities on the moon, right? People want to mine the moon or do other things on the moon. That's interesting, and SpaceX is probably going to make billions of dollars doing that, right? Because they're going to have all these contractual obligations, right? Why would the government spend $10 billion on funding their own rockets, maybe only getting a couple launches, when instead they can hire a private company that can do it literally 100 or 500 or 1,000 times cheaper than them? Okay, SpaceX is going to get all this money that otherwise would have been funneled to inefficient government rockets, and instead it's going to be funneled to a higher quality and higher quantity of these privatized SpaceX rockets, right? And I think that government in general would really benefit from this. Instead of funneling the money to government projects funded by government bureaucracy, instead let the free market, shake hands with the government and fund the private market to do this on its own. The most competitive free market competitor is the one that gets the contracts. It's the one that gets the energy. It's the one that gets the money, right? So SpaceX as a company here is probably going to make billions of dollars just from the moon missions alone, working with the government, working with NASA, working with scientists, working with the fundamental engineers that are going to have boots on the ground or boots on the regolith. So the company's probably going to make a lot of money, and Elon's probably going to make a lot of money. And unfortunately for investors, he's keeping the company private, right? You can't really invest in SpaceX very easily, but in this video, later on, the second half of this video, I'll talk about how you can make money from the Starship. Not just talking about because it's cool and future hopium, but actually how you can profit from it. So Here's another use case, not just the moon. Here's one that's really interesting to me and why it applies to flight today, right? Again, I'm recording this from an airport here, right? You know, at one time, flying in the air was too expensive to do. It was impractical. It was impossible. It was considered unsafe. People were scared of it, right? And now it's completely normal, right? And so here's the question. Here's something that's been tossed around by Elon and the SpaceX team for half a decade or so now, is eventually we could potentially have Earth-to-Earth transit via these rockets. Okay, I'm about to get on a flight here. It's probably going to be about 9-10 hours or so, but really it's going to probably be more like 20 hours once I include a layover and the second flight. Okay, imagine if instead it was 40 minutes. You know, maybe I have to drive to the port, but you know, the actual flight time, 40 minutes. That is potentially what we're looking at with using the Starship from Earth-to-Earth transit. Okay, imagine in New York City, taking a ferry out maybe a mile or two into the ocean onto a platform. You get on the rocket launches, it goes up, and once you're up, gravity does the rest, right? An airplane goes slower through the air with a lot of air resistance and friction through the air, meaning that you have to use a lot of fuel, and you have to use fuel the entire time. But the rocket, you have to just get up, and then you have less air resistance because you're farther up in the atmosphere. You know, orders of magnitude less air resistance, and you let gravity do the work and take you down to exactly where you need to go, right? Imagine going on a ferry from New York City, getting on this rocket, and then 30 minutes later being in Sydney, Australia. That is incredible, right? Imagine in Dubai doing the same thing, going out maybe a mile or two in the ocean where the sound is going to be away from the population, get on the rocket, you go up, and then you land in London, or you land in LA, you know, Las Vegas, or you land anywhere in the world, right? This is potentially what we could be looking at right now. What exactly could that look like? Well, if we had theoretically 1,000 ships, 1,000 ships making 3 daily flights, each with, let's say, just to pick a number, 100 passengers, okay? That together is 11 million trips annually. 11 million Earth-to-Earth transit trips annually. Okay, this could be a massive disruption for the airline industry. And even if it's not a disruption for the airline industry, it could be an entirely new industry in addition to the airlines, right? It's not necessarily a threat, right? We still use bicycles, even though we have cars, and we may still use airplanes for some kinds of transport, even if for other kinds of transport, the Starship makes more sense, right? Starship may not make sense for Earth-to-Earth transit for maybe the average, population or for that. But, you know, if you have maybe high value, essentials that need to get around the world quickly, or, you know, people that are willing to pay that money, then maybe you have that, right? Maybe Starship has a certain market, maybe not the entire market, right? Maybe not the commercial airline market, but there could be entire industries that could be created from this kind of global transportation that could be done within, you know, an afternoon, or what would be for one afternoon, right? So for context, you know, 1,000 ships, yes, that's a lot of work, and yes, that's going to take, you know, many, many years, and yes, you know, decades, but 1,000 ships is not that many. It's not like 1,000,000 ships. It's not even like 10,000 ships. It's only 1,000 ships. 3 flights, that already seems relatively possible, especially if they get the ship down, they get production down. Okay, 11 million trips. How many is that in context? Well, roughly there are about 900 million airplanes tickets sold annually. So I got my one today. Well, I guess technically 2 with my layover. And, you know, there's thousands of other people in this airport. You wouldn't know it from where I am right now in the airport. But, that's context here. That just with 1,000 ships, we could potentially be looking at mere decades of having this kind of Earth-to-Earth transit via the Starship be a significant percentage of all airborne travel, right? By significant percentage, I mean like 1%, 3%, 5%, whatever it is. At some point, probably within your lifetime, if you're going to live another couple decades, you may very well see this become relatively commonplace. You might know a few people that have done this, right? Maybe you yourself will have done this, right? That it's not that absurd. Give it 10 years of development, and probably this will start. Give it 30 years of development, and probably this will become pretty common among people with higher incomes, right? In the same way that the iPhone I'm holding in my hand was common for people with higher incomes, right? Maybe in 20, 30, 35 years, this will become very common for people with those higher incomes. Go out 50 years, and maybe this is common even among everyday plebs like you and me, right? It's something really interesting to think about, and that's a huge market, and that's a lot of money going to SpaceX, okay? Now, there's another one, too, that I also think is very interesting. And it's one that's probably going to get some heads turning, and probably ones that people are going to roll their eyes about, right? And that is off-planet mining. This is something that's really interesting, okay? This little yellow line here is, it's a visual, it's a visual cue. It's not, a technical line, but it's pointing out a really important concept, okay? In the year 1100, gold production, there were 4 tons of gold produced in 1100. Okay, again, for context, the Starship will be able to launch 50 times that much weight into orbit. Okay, so look at a Starship. That has a payload 50 times larger than the annual gold production of the entire planet. Okay, a little over or about 1,000 years ago, or less than 1,000 years ago. Okay, 4 tons. Okay, it took 700 years. Okay, over 700 years for that to double. Okay, it was 7 tons in 1817 at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, I want you to think about that. It took 700 years to get 3 more tons of annual gold production. Okay, let's skip forward, not another 700 years, but a mere 120 years. Okay, end of World War II, 1945, 651 tons. Okay, think about that. It took 700 years to get 3 more tons of gold production per year. Within the next 100 years, we almost 100x'd the amount of gold we were producing annually. Okay, now here we are in 2024. How much gold are we producing currently? Depending on who you ask, right? The last couple years of data is, hard to gauge, but you go back a couple years, roughly, we're mining about 3,800 tons of gold annually. Okay, which is still another, what is that, 6-7x of just 1945, so 80 years ago, right? So a shorter period of time. Also, frankly, much less on the gold standards, so less of incentive, right? If gold actually was priced at its fair value, which is probably at least 10 times more than it is right now, I highly suspect we'd be mining much more gold. Now, of course, the problem on the environment is that when gold price goes up, you have a greater incentive to cut down trees. You have a greater incentive to cut down the Amazon rainforest. In fact, it's a horrible thing. It's very disturbing, but if you go back in time, plot gold price against Amazon deforestation, in particular certain areas like the Guiana Shield and the northeastern quadrant of the Amazon rainforest. Okay, plot deforestation levels on any annual given year with palladium and gold prices, or and other rare earth minerals, right? Diamond, silver, whatever. Do that, you'll be shocked. When gold goes up, consistently, 6 to 12 months later, deforestation rates go up, right? This is the horrible thing with gold production and with mining these minerals, right? So there's a great economic incentive for companies, private individuals, to have off-Earth mining, which, again, sounds absurd to our early 21st minds, and it sounds like science fiction, because it frankly has been science fiction for decades. For the entirety of the 20th century, it was, science fiction essentially, okay? But this is important to keep in mind. Even if asteroid mining is not a serious consideration for another 30, 40 years, nor if it's profitable for maybe 70 or 80 years, okay, by the end of the century, it is still perfectly reasonable for humanity to refine more minerals and more material next century, the 22nd century, than the sum total of humanity combined, right? Just like we were looking at the mass to orbit, comparing the different ships, and why Starship just completely obliterates the global mass to orbit output of the sum total, we could be looking at the very same thing with asteroid mining. For thousands of years, gold was too expensive to extract out of the ground, right? In the pre-gold era, where we use salt or wheat, for our form of storing value and exchanging. Why? Because it was cheaper to have the salt, and it was more important because it had a greater utility, right? And it was too expensive to go out into the ground and dig down for gold, right? Why do you have a use for gold in the pre-gold standard, right? And the same thing with Bitcoin. Why do you have use for Bitcoin in the pre-Bitcoin standard, right? Gold has a greater utility than Bitcoin, right? It's the same thing with salt. And the salt era and wheat before gold, right? Salt and wheat has a greater utility than gold, and gold is too expensive to extract out of the ground. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is too expensive for previous civilizations to create because we didn't have the electric grid. We didn't have computers, right? I'm using more computing power right now via this camera on my computer and this phone in my hand. I'm using more computing power than the sum total of humanity 100 years ago, right? This is why we have these different eras and stages, and we're exiting the gold era, we're entering the digital monetary era, and we're going to see a lot more gold produced as a result of this, right? So this is something really interesting to think about, that we could be looking at the same thing in the future. And so it's mind-blowing to me to imagine the kind of future, and I encourage you to do this too. Imagine a future, maybe, again, let's assume this asteroid mining concept is not, financially or economically viable for another 50 or 80 years, right? But even with that, 100, 120 years from now, right? Let's say the year 2140, imagine a future where it is economically profitable for a company to create some sort of satellite or something powered on solar energy, right? Powered on, the sun, right? Send it into space. You have an AI in space. It's completely autonomous, completely unmanned, right? Completely self-sufficient. You send it out to space on one of these rockets, like the Starship or whatever, or one of its descendants long into the future. You send it out there, it goes to the asteroid, it uses the energy from the sun to power it, and just blast this rock, right? And people think that it's difficult, but actually it's much easier to mine on those space rocks, or will be, than it is on Earth, because on Earth you got to cut down the trees, you got to destroy the forest, you got to displace human beings. It's going to be really expensive. Oh, you have all the environmental concerns, right? And everyone's going to hate you for doing it. But you also have to get through all the dirt and other materials on Earth, right? All the ore. But on an asteroid, you basically just have water, ice, and the minerals, right? You just use heat, blast away the ice, blast away the water, the non-valuable stuff, right? And collect the stuff you want, right? Instead of it being diluted in the Earth's ground, where it's already been mined for thousands of years, and where it's already has humans and nature living atop of it. Instead, with the asteroid, you can just extract it. You can just bring it out, right? In the same way that people in California, the gold rush, just picked up gold nuggets on the ground. That's basically what you're doing with these asteroids, except these nuggets are a lot bigger, right? So imagine that, where a company sends out some sort of satellite or mining device, goes out to these asteroids, blows them apart, gets the resources at once, uses some of the minerals or some of the materials to create some sort of 3D printing, like aluminum printing, or there's many other kinds of ways. You cannot only print 3D print plastics, but you can also 3D print metals and basically weld them together, right? So imagine these AI automated things creating these 3D printed capsules, sending the capsules back to Earth, and then they just rain down on the ocean, or on some sort of landing pad, or on some sort of place where they can land safely away from people. Okay, I hear you. This is starting to sound a little crazy. It's starting to sound a little far-fetched. It may sound a little too good to be true, right? And of course, it's going to take a very long time. I'm not saying this anytime soon, but I really want to re-emphasize again. If we were having this conversation 80 years ago or 100 years ago, and we were talking about an airport, imagine all the things you would have to describe at once, right? You have to describe the airport, you have to describe what oil is, you have to describe what gasoline is. These digital screens are completely, difficult for people to imagine, right? You have to explain electricity, you have to explain the cars, these cars that are driving around, these little machines, right? The little voices coming out of the air, right, outside the ceiling, telling you to, watch your baggage and don't leave it abandoned like I have right now. All of that you're going to have to explain, right? It's going to be scary to people. It's going to be overwhelming. They're not going to understand where the voice is coming from, where's the LED screens coming from, right? How do the planes take off? How can a metal tube fly through the sky and not crash, right? And so safely that it's literally statistically safer to fly in an airplane than to walk down the street, right? I mean, it's absolutely impossible for people of the past world to try to envision the technologies of the future world. And that, I think, is what we could be looking at here, right? It's hard for us to accept that we've mined all this material the last few thousand years, and yet next century alone, even if these asteroid mining things and even if these concepts take half of a century yet to begin becoming economically profitable, even if they take half a century, probably next century we're mining way more materials than the last 4,000 years combined for all of human history, right? In the future, every year we'll be producing way more than the entire past combined. And again, that sounds crazy now. That sounds crazy to watching this now, but it's already happened. Again, look at this diagram here. We are currently mining more gold every week than the sum total of humanity in 1100, okay? Like, think about that. Babylon was this great empire. The Assyrians were a great empire. Ancient Egypt was a great empire. You had the Dutch, you had the Portuguese, you had the Spanish, you had this and that empire. All these empires. We are mining more gold per week globally than they mined in their entire multi-century and sometimes multi-millennia long empires. Okay, that is how much energy we are channeling today. That's how much productivity and innovation and technological progress we are channeling today. And so I do not think it is unreasonable that when technology unlocks new levels for innovation to upgrade to, it's entirely possible we could have new orders of magnitude. We could have new entire frontiers of harvesting metals, right, and materials, right? And I think that this is really exciting, because imagine a future where it is as barbaric to think of cutting down trees and forcing species to extinction just to get gold out of the ground, when instead you could just go to space and get it. Like, I think in the far enough future, people will look back at us, you and me, and think that we were barbaric, right? In the same way we look today back at ancient people, and we're amazed that they would have open flame in their home instead of a light bulb, right? Like a campfire or open wood stove or candles or oil lamps, right? It's like we look back at that, we think that's primitive, we think that's insane. We're so glad we don't live in those stone ages. I'm telling you, we're living in those ages now, right? That people are going to look back and be like, wait, you had to kill animals to get your gold? Oh my goodness, that's horrible. And you would print political currency? Wait. What's political currency? Wait. You're telling me governments would issue numbers and people would buy the numbers because if they didn't buy the numbers, the government would come to them with guns and shoot them, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. The 21st century sounds awful, right? I mean, I'm joking here, right? I'm not saying I'm ungrateful, right? I'm very grateful to be alive, and obviously this is the most prosperous century in human history thus far. But the future people in context are not going to be able to understand a world where political currency existed. They're not going to be able to understand a world where we had to force species to extinction to get platinum and diamonds and gold out of the ground so that we could then put it in somebody's safe across the ocean, right? People are going to be amazed that we had children in Africa, mining for cobalt and these other metals and dying for it, just so that people in France or people in America or people in Germany or the UK could, use them to, watch anime on their phones. Or, in the case of diamonds, blood diamonds, dig the diamonds out of the ground in one place, kill a bunch of people and species in the process, and incite a whole bunch of wars and tyrannical dictators, just so we can then wear the diamonds on our ring instead of synthetic diamonds, right? It's like people will look back and be, wait, that's a real diamond? Well, why not just a synthetic diamond? And why diamonds at all? Diamonds are cheap, right? Diamonds are abundant, right? And the same thing with gold, right? All of this together is, I'm not predicting anything new with the asteroid mining concept or with any of these concepts or the Earth-to-Earth transit with the Starship, right? None of these things are new. It's just a continuation of the same. And that sameness is continued technological innovation and continued productivity for all of humanity at a faster and faster rate. That's the only difference. We had more productivity from the year 1100 to the year 1817, right? We nearly doubled the amount of gold produced annually from 4 to 7 tons. It's just that it took a lot longer. And there's nothing different today. Maybe in the year 2140, we're mining 38,000 tons of gold a year, which would be a 10x. Maybe we're mining 75,000 tons of gold a year. That would be about a 20x, right? Maybe much more. And to finish this point, here's one lasting point, imprint to have. The average 500-ton asteroid is estimated to have, or if a theoretical 500-ton asteroid is estimated to have 175 times current annual platinum production. Okay, one moderately sized asteroid, 500 tons. Okay, again, think weight. Okay, look at the Starship, the top half of the Starship. Increase that by about 2.5 times. That's what about 500 tons looks like. Okay, that's not that big, right, for an asteroid. Even an asteroid that relatively small has an estimated platinum supply nearly 200 times greater than current annual production. Okay, just think about that. When it comes to platinum, when it comes to gold, when it comes to all the other metals and minerals on these asteroids, right? A single one might have more than decades worth, right? Even if we're horribly efficient for the first, century or so at mining these asteroids, even if we're only, horribly inefficient, even if it's very expensive to do, even if it doesn't make total economic sense, even with that, the amount of supply that could be dumped into the market or dropped back down to Earth from space is simply gargantuan. It's simply monumental, right? Again, in the same way that people from 1,000 years ago would be shocked that we're mining almost 100 times more gold per year now than they were then, despite their empire being the largest yet in human history, it's the same thing for us today. Our empire today, our American empire, our fiat empire is so large we can't possibly imagine the amount of power that these small empires, these small companies of the future are going to be able to wield, right? A relatively small or low-ranking mining company in the future might be producing way more raw materials than the sum total of the planet today. Okay, and again, this is going to take a very long time. Don't get your hopes up. The reason I'm talking about this is not because this is on the near horizon. The reason I'm talking about this, though, is because Starship, this, Elon Musk's Starship, this rocket that we've just seen launch, or we're seeing continue to have improvements on iterations, this is the key to making that possible. You cannot have any conversation about economically viable and profitable off-planet mining, whether it's on the moon or on an asteroid or whatever. You cannot have that conversation until you have a rapidly reusable rocket with a significant amount of mass to orbit. You cannot have that conversation until that's been invented, and Starship appears to be that small stepping stone that now the conversation can begin. And now the conversation can begin, we might be able to actually see tangible results in 10 years, 30 years, or 50 years, or whatever it may be. But now, with Starship, that's actually a consideration. This was sci-fi talk until literally probably about now. This year, these next few years, This is crossing the chasm where things like this, and trust me, there's a whole rabbit hole. The papers on this are very interesting, and many other things too, which we won't get into. All of these things are science fiction until you have this key. Okay, the Starship is the ship getting from Europe to North America. It is the stepping stone from on Earth to off Earth projects right now. Okay, and again, this gets back to my concept that I talk about all the time. We have less technologically in common with the near future than the distant past, right? For thousands of years, 100% of all minerals ever mined are on planet. In the future, we have less in common with the future than the past. For the first time, maybe in 50 years or so, we have the first materials mined off planet. And maybe in 100 years or a couple hundred years, or maybe not even that, maybe less than 100 years, we have more material mined off Earth than on planet. And then eventually after that, we have more sum total mined off Earth than ever before on Earth, right? So here's the question. Okay, I get it, Luke. Starship is a big deal. Okay, I hear you. Earth-to-Earth transit, decades away, but it's probably really a big deal. Okay, I hear you. Asteroid mining, all these other wild out there concepts, they're still far-fetched. But in context of the Starship, they just got literally an order of magnitude more likely, an order of magnitude more realistic, right? Maybe going from 0.01% probable to now 0.1% probable, which is a huge change, right? Even though it's still basically improbable on your day-to-day life. Okay, I get it. Starship's a big deal. Starship's a big deal. Shut up. How do we get to making money? Okay, let's talk about that. You can buy SpaceX stocks, but here's the problem. You probably can't, because you probably aren't a multi-millionaire. And, SpaceX is not listed publicly, right? But even if it was, here's the problem with stocks. Stocks always carry counterparty risk. Okay, just because SpaceX is a wonderful company and it's probably going to make a lot of money in the future, probably billions, tens of billions, perhaps even trillions of dollars, that doesn't necessarily mean the stock would increase by a factor of 100x. Okay, again, think about the American government. Okay, look at the American government. The American government is the most powerful institution known to mankind ever in human history. The U.S. government has 60% of the world's monetary reserve currency status, right? 60% of the world's money, right? We have the largest military. We spend way more on the military than basically all of our allies combined, right? We have a massive military, a massive economy, a really significant population with, 35 to 40% of the world's wealth. Okay, just because America as a country represents basically half, or at least a third, of the world's prosperity and military might, that doesn't mean that the dollar goes up. That doesn't mean that the bonds go up. Okay, the pieces of paper that the institution releases do not necessarily go up one-to-one with the value of the institution, right? Now, obviously, this is a stock versus currency. There's different things, but you see the point I'm getting at, right? Governance risk, operational risk, strategic risk, financial risk, competitive risk, technology risk, political risk, facilities risk, regulatory risk, employee risk, vendor risk, customer risk, reputational risk, currency risk, war risk, tax risk, weather risk, customs risk, legal risk, tort risk, patent risk, health risk, lifestyle risk, dilution risk, and maybe, in the case of SpaceX, solar flare risk. The point is, there are all kinds of things that can happen. SpaceX could be a wonderful SpaceX could be a wonderful company for the next 30 years, but then maybe someone outcompetes SpaceX, and they become more economically viable than SpaceX, and suddenly your SpaceX stocks are in trouble, right? Perhaps SpaceX is a wonderful company and really produces true innovations, but the company's not managed well. Maybe Elon Musk goes crazy, or maybe someone under Elon Musk is lying to him, or there's some sort of fraud or some sort of other event like that, right? There are literally thousands of different ways at which this company could go down, even if they succeed on all these wild aspirations, right? And this is why people try to diversify into a stock index, right? Maybe I don't want to buy SpaceX, the specific company, because I don't want to have a huge percentage of my net worth allocated to one company with one CEO with one business plan. Instead, I'll buy the index. Maybe I'll buy an index of space companies. Or maybe if I even want a broader exposure, I'll buy an index of all the companies. And yeah, maybe the mining stocks I own from on-Earth mining, maybe they'll suffer eventually, against these space companies. Or maybe this, but if I'm buying the index, basically I'm buying a numerical system that prices in all productivity, via the fiat means of cash flow. And that is how I'll save my purchasing power. And that's how I'll get rich from this economic prosperity. And I have a better solution here. That solution is called Bitcoin. Okay, Elon Musk has described how the cost of a ticket going from Earth to Mars in the future could potentially be approximately that of about a house. Now, what this chart you see on the screen here is the price of a house in terms of Bitcoin. See, the price of housing in terms of American political currency has skyrocketed, especially in the last 5 to 7 years or so. Now, in terms of Bitcoin, though, the price of a house is down over 90%. It's down from over 6 billion Satoshis about, 7, 8 years ago or so. Now it's down over 90%. to just 630 million Satoshis. Now, it's still a lot of sats, but it's not nearly as many as it was 5 or 6 years ago, right? Again, it's down 90%. You have to ask yourself this. Why is housing going up in political currency? Why is housing going down in terms of Bitcoin? Is it that the Bitcoin is going up, or is it that the housing is going down? Okay, again, think about it in terms of dollars. Is the house you live in actually going up in value, or is it just that the currency you're pricing that house within is going down in value? See, this is all mental gymnastics, but it's all true. These are all equally true statements, right? This is what we're looking at with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not going up in value, it is, but it's less accurate, or it's less true to say it's going up in value, and it's more true to say the houses are going down in value. Why? Because we're building more houses. We're producing more housing. We have more stuff that we're trying to fit into a finite ledger, right? If you have a scarcity of money, you have an abundance in everything else. If you have an abundance of money, like the dollar, you have a scarcity in everything else, including housing and including the cost of housing, which is what is forcing up the cost of housing, right? Okay, so let's go through the numbers here. If Bitcoin remains decentralized and secure, right, those are the two key things in blockchain trilemma, right? Decentralized and secure. Decentralized and secure. If it remains those two things, it is logical to assume that that sound, hard monetary system, and that, therefore, monetary premium, will absorb the monetary premium of all the less sound or flat-out unsound, soft or flat-out unsofter, or, completely malleable monetary premiums, right? Bitcoin doesn't have to change. It just has to remain decentralized and secure, which it has done so far for over 15 years with, no failure point to date, right? If just that assumption continues, and Bitcoin continues to absorb that free market monetary premium from all these other assets, including housing, we could be looking at as little as 4 million Satoshis, or much lower, per American home. Really think about that. Okay, 4 million sats. Now, how did it get that number? It's because there are only 1.04 million sats per house today. There are roughly 2.2 billion houses on the planet. There's 21 million Bitcoin. It's a simple division. You get 0.01 Bitcoin per house. Now, granted, the American house, on average, is way more luxurious than the rest of the world. So if we assume that the American house, on average, is about 4 times more valuable than the average house across the planet, easily you could be looking at 4 million sats or less. And in my opinion, I believe we're looking at significantly less. Why? Because there's not really 21 million Bitcoin. 6 million Bitcoin have been lost, millions more are hodled, and we're only talking housing here. This is not pricing in cars. This is not pricing in all the productivity from companies like SpaceX and many other companies also having groundbreaking innovations. This is just housing. This is just a simple division between the number of houses and the number of Bitcoins. Forgetting the lost Bitcoins and forgetting literally all the other asset classes, only housing. So here's an interesting thought. Let's say it is 4 million sats, just for the sake of example. With one Bitcoin, theoretically, if you bought one Bitcoin and held it to this theoretical future, with one coin, you might be able to buy a round trip to Mars and back from Mars. And you would still have 92% of your money left, 92% of your stack left. And you'd live to tell the tale, not be a one-way trip where you got to go there and die. You'd come back, right? This is, again, this is all theoretical, but this is very similar to what Elon Musk has talked about. 7 years ago, when the median price of a home in the United States was $200,000, Elon said that this is the ultimate goal. Eventually, decades into the future, get the price of a ticket of going to Mars, both there and back, to being approximately the cost of one American home. Now, that's what he's saying combined, right? I'm saying if it cost that much each direction, okay, so that's a big difference. I'm actually doubling it. So not only am I quadrupling the number of sats per home, and not only am I forgetting all other asset classes, I'm also assuming Elon is wrong by a factor of 2, and it costs that much each direction. But even with all of those conservative assumptions, and I do believe those are conservative assumptions, even with all of those things, you would still have over 90% of your stack left with just one Bitcoin. And right now, at the time of recording, when Bitcoin's about $70,000, there are millions of people around the world that can stack way more than one Bitcoin. You have the opportunity of the millennia, you have the opportunity of a lifetime right in front of you here, okay? In reality, on the multi-decade time scale, it actually could be potentially cheaper than what Elon Musk has talked about, right? It could be potentially way less than the cost of a house, right? But, and again, these are all theoreticals. This is all in the future. But again, I'm quadrupling the number of sats. I'm forgetting about, first of all, I'm having the average American home be 4 times more expensive than the average house around the planet. We're also assuming We're also assuming that it's twice as expensive because you're paying that much each way. And we're also assuming that we never improve based on that ambitious goal from Elon of getting the price of a ticket approximately the same of a house, right? In a long enough time horizon, hopefully, the cost would eventually be the point where it is comparable, right? And likewise, hopefully the price of houses also goes down too. Again, once factoring in the 6 million at least lost Bitcoin are held by Satoshi, and hopefully a doubling of houses in the future, right? Hopefully we go from 2.2 billion houses to 4.4 billion houses. Okay, in that, a single house may cost a mere third of a million sats, 330, 320, 300, 200,000 sats. And again, that's still ignoring all other asset classes. That's ignoring SpaceX. That's ignoring all the minerals they're going to mine and all these companies are going to mine. That's ignoring all equities. That's ignoring all materials and all resources. That's ignoring everything else. Just housing. By merely doubling the number of houses in, let's say, the next 50 years or so, right? And I hope and pray we do, right? The bottom 40% of the world's population, right? Mainly people in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, right? They're having rapidly improving living standards, right? Hopefully we double the number of houses and households in the future, right? Just by doing that and factoring in the lost Bitcoin today. Not assuming a single more coin is ever lost again, and there will be many more lost, right? A lot of people don't have their UTXOs managed. A lot of people don't have proper self-custody done. I'll speak on this later in the video. A lot of people are going to lose their coins. Maybe they only have a fourth of a coin or half a coin or 2 coins, but here or there, I see it all the time. Just in the last week alone, with all the people I've talked to, the lost coins, I've easily talked to people that sum total probably 30, 40 coins. And the last week alone, at my work at the Bitcoin Advisor, people that come to me because they were procrastinating their self-custody, and they say, crap, Luke, I had 2 coins, but I think I just lost a third of a coin doing something stupid. I get it now. I want to lock this down with multi-sig, blah, 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 having an estate plan, inheritance plan, all this stuff, stuff I've helped people with, right? Just all that, and just from these people I talk to, right? A third of a coin here, 10th of a coin there, 10 coins over here, 2 coins over there. You add it all up. I'm talking to people where, I'm seeing people just anecdotally in my work experience in Bitcoin, 10, 20, 30 coins a week, right, are being lost just from people I'm talking to, right? And that's why they're coming to me, so that when they come to us, they don't lose the Bitcoin, right? Our clients have never lost a single Satoshi in the custody setups we help set up for them, right? So anyway, that's a pitch. I'll get to that later at the end of the video. But the point is, this is assuming that we only double the number of houses, not triple, only double the houses. This is assuming the quality of the houses does not go up, right? This is not assuming that the houses go from the current houses, where the median house of the planet is lower than the median house of American house. This is assuming that we don't improve that. This is assuming we only double the houses. And again, this is assuming we forget all other asset classes and that not a single Bitcoin is ever lost again. Those are 4 really, really sandbagged conservative assumptions, in my opinion. And even with that, we are looking at less than a third of a million Satoshis per house. And even if we assume that Elon is wrong and that it costs about one median house both to and from Mars, we could be looking at way less than 1 million sats per round trip to Mars in a long enough time horizon, multiple decades away. That to me is really, really amazing, and that is really profound, right? So why now, a lot of people may be confused. Okay, Luke, you're talking about Bitcoin. I follow you for Bitcoin content. Why are you talking about Starship? Okay, why is Starship important? And likewise, if you're watching this video for Starship content, why are you talking about Bitcoin? Okay, this chart is really important here. Why am I talking about this? Future technology is priceless in terms of ancient technology, okay? The fundamental misunderstanding people have with both of these things is that you are not watching Bitcoin going up, okay? Bitcoin is simply pricing in global innovation currently. That's what's happening here. The way you get rich from Starship is not from Bitcoin being a number on a screen that magically goes up. No. The wealth you get from Starship is the fact that Starship can channel more energy more efficiently than you could on your own, right? We mine more gold today because we don't use caloric energy via our biceps and our arms using a pickaxe and digging out of the ground. No, we use machines using oil and gasoline to get the minerals out of the ground, right? The wealth from innovation is from those machines. It is from the energy those machines can channel, right? It's the same thing with Starship. The way you get rich from Starship is by getting a certain amount of that energy directed towards you. And the way you get that energy directed towards you is not by buying the gold or the whatever that the Starships or the Starship's descendants mine. And it's not by owning the Starships, because we're always going to make more gold. We're always going to make more Starships. You're going to get debased via innovation. You have to have some sort of numerical system to say, this is the percentage I have of this energy, of this innovation, right? This is the claim, this is the stake I have in this productivity, right? And this is what people think stocks are. When stocks are trying to buy that share of that productivity, of that corporate entity, right? But Bitcoin is better because you do not have the counterparty risk of Elon Musk. You do not have the counterparty risk of the balance sheet. You don't have those couple dozen risks that I mentioned before a couple slides ago, right? All those risks are totally absent in Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a commodity without any of those single points of failure, without any of those risks, right? That's not going to happen. And not only that, but it's also pricing in the value production from SpaceX as well as all of SpaceX's competitors. If you're buying into SpaceX stock, you are actively hoping and assuming the other space companies are also going to fail. When you buy Bitcoin, you get all of the upside exposure of all of the space companies together, and it doesn't matter which one wins. It doesn't matter if Bezos wins with Blue Origin. It doesn't matter if Elon wins with SpaceX. It doesn't matter if Branson's going to win. It doesn't matter who wins. Whoever wins, that energy is going to be priced into your money because your money is what? Decentralized and secure. Decentralized and secure. That is all that matters. And as long as it remains, what? Decentralized and secure, and it does not fail in decentralization or security, it's going to absorb the monetary premium from all of these things, from the asteroids, from the bonds, from the equity, from the fiat monetary premium we give housing. All of these things flow back to Bitcoin. You do not get rich from Starship by buying Starships or equity. You get rich from buying the underlying material, right? Again, let's go back to gold. What is better, to buy 1 ounce of gold 1,000 years ago and hodl it and hold it for 1,000 years, or to buy 1/10% of the gold and hold that percentage for the 1,000 years? That is the better ideal, because if you buy 1 ounce of gold, 1,000 years later, it's going to be 1 ounce of gold, and that's going to be a significantly lower percentage of all the economic output of all the gold miners in the world. Okay, if you buy that fixed percentage of all the gold miners in the world and you own that indefinitely, in the future, you are inherently going to have way more purchasing power than you do today. So this is the point I'm trying to get at. If you think Starship is cool, you don't have to just think it's cool and go on with your day. You can actively get rich from Starship. You can actually make money from Starship. And the way you make money from Starship is from buying the underlying ledger that the Starship's future productivity is eventually going to flow into. That is Bitcoin. A lot of people don't understand that now. A lot of people think Bitcoin is a bubble that just goes up and up and up, and they fail to understand it is not that Bitcoin is going up. It is that as productivity continues, that all these other things are going down. Right now, let's throw some numbers out here. Okay. It is estimated today that if we wanted to throw a human being onto Mars, it would cost about $10 billion. Okay, and again, that might sound absurd, but again, we were looking at the SLS rockets, earlier in the discussion here. That was $4 billion just to get to orbit, right? About $10 billion is a one-way ticket sending a human being to Mars. Who knows how long they live, and they are going to die there. We're not going to be able to get them back, right? Okay, if a future round trip from Earth to Mars, Mars back to Earth, costs, let's say, 10 million sats, and again, that might be really, really conservative, right? We were looking at barely 1/3 of a million sats, per round trip, right? So this potentially could be too, pessimistic by a factor of 10, but a mere 10 million sats potentially could be that round trip in the far enough future. Okay, that round trip in today's terms is 10 billion. Okay, 10 million sats is 1/10 of one coin. That is $100 billion per Bitcoin. Okay, now, do I believe, no, am I saying that literally? No, of course not. I'm not saying that literally. What I'm saying is that future technology is priceless in terms of current technology. Again, I'm in an airport here, right? Like, how do you price an airport or how do you price an airplane in terms of goats? How do you price a car in terms of goldfish? How do you price this phone that I'm holding in terms of a cob of corn, right? It's like, there's no logical price, right? If I want to eat, well, then of course the phone's going to be worth less than the corn, right? But if my goal is to record audio for a video that I can then post online so that, internet friends around the world can watch it, I mean, well, then the corn's price, what is this worth? 1,000 years of corn? 1,000,000 years of corn? 10 billion years of corn, right? There's no logical price, right? And that's what I'm talking about here when it comes to Bitcoin. Most people think that Bitcoin at $1 million is too optimistic. Most people think that Bitcoin at $10 million is too optimistic. I'm talking here about a $100 billion coin, because future technology is priceless in terms of current technology. And if one coin in the future can get you easily 10 round trips, and you'll probably still have money left over, like, that's what we're looking at here. Now let's be more optimistic and say it only costs 1 million satoshis, maybe 320,000 sats each direction. That's 600,000, 640,000 satoshis. You still got 40% of your million sats left. But let's say that with taxes and fees and whatever surcharges they add, you're spending 1 million sats. Okay, that's 1 trillion. 1 trillion with a T. Okay, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense, and it's not supposed to make logical sense. because I'm getting at a deeper issue here, that there is no top, both in terms of nominal, because, the US dollar is going down forever, but also in terms of real purchasing power, because we're going to have continually more purchasing power into the future. Now, stick with me here because we're getting towards the end of the slides here, and I think that these last few are really helpful, useful aids, or hopefully they're helpful and useful aids for helping try to put this all, tied up in a nice little bow here and trying to get a nice visual representation of what exactly I'm talking about here, okay? Here we have a green line and an orange line, okay? And you with a little nice white arrow there pointing where we are in time, obviously left being past and right being towards the future. So one of these two lines, okay, the green line is productivity, right? If we can somehow quantify productivity, maybe you define that in terms of number of humans, maybe you define it in terms of number of terawatts or amount of electricity we're using, however you want to define it, as a conceptual framework. Let's view the green line as productivity, and let's view the orange line as prices denominated in Bitcoin, okay? Not the market cap, but prices of things denominated in Bitcoin, right? Prices of houses, the prices of a Starship, the prices of gold, the prices of all these things, okay? As we produce more stuff, right, as the green line goes up, the price of said stuff in relation to the rest of the world goes down. If you're only mining 4 tons of gold annually, the value of 1 ton of gold is going to be way higher. The price of gold is going to be way higher than the price of 1 ton of gold in the future, where you're mining 4,000 tons in the future, right? Again, one way I like to think of it is that if you went back to ancient Rome and you had a form of a gold standard, there were only 21 million gold coins issued by the Roman government, right? And let's say these gold coins are magical and they lived on beyond the end of the Roman Empire, right? If you had 1 gold coin then, what is 1/21 millionth of that world of antiquity and the ancient world worth, right? What is that 1 gold coin worth? Now, those 21 million gold coins survive into now, the present age, when you're watching this. That gold coin can buy you a lot more. Why? Because prices are a lot lower in terms of that gold coin. That's what I'm trying to communicate here with these two lines. The green line is productivity, which is a flat line for hundreds of years, thousands of years. Then it gets steeper, it wiggles up, and then it gets more rapid, and then it just goes vertical at some point. Essentially in our modern line, it goes vertical, right? We're continually growing. It's continually getting larger, right? And this is how it's been all in human history, right? You go back 1,000 years, it's an exponential curve. You go back, 3,000 years. You go back 30 years. You go back 300 years. Whatever you pick, this is continuing to grow and grow and grow. And so we're going to probably see the same thing here, except the difference is, in all of ancient history, we're pricing in terms of political currency and political monies. Now, for the first time, we have Bitcoin. Bitcoin is this kind of measuring meter stick that remains consistent. It has a consistent, number of numerical units, right? In the same way, a meter stick is an exact length defined by the speed of light, instead of using various political forms of measurement, right? Whether it's the king's arm or the king's foot, or this or that, the other, grains of barley, whatever it is, whatever you're choosing to measure, right? It's not some sort of arbitrary thing that's based on government fiat declaration, but instead it's something that's based on a constant, right? The speed of light is a constant in the universe. And a meter stick, it doesn't matter how long the meter stick is, it only matters that it's a consistent number, right? And likewise with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter it's 20 million Bitcoin. What matters is it's a consistent number based on a reality of the universe. And the reality of the universe is that math always works. And therefore, Bitcoin will continue to always work. And so, how do you get rich from Starship? Why am I talking about 100 billion or $1 trillion Bitcoin? Or at least conceptually, maybe not literally, but at least conceptually, nominally, definitely. But the point is, you can buy a fixed percentage of the future global purchasing power and output, which Starship will help accelerate, by acquiring a part of that fixed meter stick, finite, hard money system today. By acquiring it today, you can purchase more tomorrow. By buying that 1 gold Roman coin in ancient Rome, you can buy the iPhone in the future, right? You can buy electricity in the future. You can buy things that you don't even realize exist yet. And that is potentially what we're looking at Starship. When you buy Bitcoin today, your kids and grandkids might be buying things that you can't possibly conceive of, using way more energy than you can conceive of, right? And here's the funny twist of irony, that a few sats in the future, a very small percentage of Bitcoin in the future, will be able to buy you way more than what 1 Bitcoin can do today. With 1 Bitcoin, you don't have a hope or any chance of ever going to Mars. But in the future, people might be able to go to Mars many times over with 1 Bitcoin. Is it because Bitcoin magically goes up and it's, some sort of kumbaya utopia and, Bitcoin just magically makes everything better and sin goes away and everything's perfect? No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, Starship, innovation, and technology. Humans have an incentive to accelerate those things, and those things will accelerate, and as those things get better, those will be priced into that Bitcoin, right? That's what you're looking at here. The more productivity we cram into the global monetary ledger, as long as it remains decentralized secure, the farther prices are going to fall. It's true with Starship, it's true with housing, it's true with gold, it's true with platinum, it's true with everything else I've discussed in this video. The best shot for you to get rich via Starship and to take advantage of this really cool innovation and this thing that's going on, the best way for you to make money is to just buy the money today and hold it. You don't have to profit, you don't have to trade it, you don't have to buy SpaceX equity. Just buy the money of the future. The money of the future is not gold. The money of the future is not mammoth hides. The money of the future is not salt. The money of the future is not SpaceX stock. The money of the future is the largest globally dominant proof of work system that's decentralized and secure, that is Bitcoin or bit power or bit electricity, whatever you want to call it, right? That the dominant global ledger that takes electricity to reproduce or to duplicate, that remains decentralized and secure, outside the control of governments, outside the control of billionaires, outside the control of companies. That is what you want to buy to make your money. You make your money in Starship by buying the money of the future today. I keep saying that, I keep repeating it, but it's important because most people don't understand it, okay? Bitcoin forces prices down by enabling and encouraging and monetizing absurd productivity increases. That's one side point I want to make. All this innovation we're seeing in SpaceX, all this innovation we're seeing currently, that is still within the fiat system. Okay? This different system I'm talking about is only going to accelerate the monetary incentive to do that. If you're within the fiat system, you have a massive monetary incentive, if you're a billionaire, to hire lobbyists to manage the government or to manage this or to manage that better in your advantage. Okay? Under the Bitcoin standard, the only way for you to get more money is to provide more value for other people. The only way for you to compete under Bitcoin standard is to no longer compete with the lobbyists and the government bureaucracies and agencies. The new competition is with Elon Musk. You want more Bitcoin? You want more money? You want to increase your status and wealth? You got to compete against Elon now. Okay? All of this innovation that I'm talking about, literally everything I've talked about in the video up to now, all of that is happening within an ancient monetary system, an ancient monetary network, not on a modern, sound monetary network. And when that modern and sound monetary network is adopted over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, the rate of productivity and acceleration of technological progress is only going to accelerate, okay? Bitcoin is going up forever in nominal terms against US dollars. Bitcoin is going up forever against real terms as long as humans continue to be productive and have technological innovation in the future. And therefore, Bitcoin denominated prices are going down forever, right? Future technology is priceless in terms of ancient technology. And again, it is not that Bitcoin's going up, but that we are being more productive in terms of the finite ledger that remains decentralized and secure. Okay, Starship does not make you rich by you buying or pumping up a number, whether it's a stock or a coin or whatever. It makes you rich by channeling energy more efficiently than you ever could do on your own. Bitcoin simply reflects that reality, and that's why you have to buy it. So this little image here is one that is just a conceptual one, right? It's not literal. This isn't anytime soon. This is many years away. Elon, being an optimistic one, he thinks it's only a decade or so around the corner. Realistically, we can assume it's going to take longer. But again, even if we want to be cautiously optimistic, reality is all this innovation, all these things are already happening. Again, are under the fiat standard, right? Okay. 1 million Satoshis, 0.01 BTC, is only $700 at the time of recording. Okay, I'm spending more money on my airline ticket today than $700, just to put it in context, okay? So let's take 3 assumptions. Assumption number 1, Bitcoin remains decentralized and secure as the globally dominant proof-of-work network that, was backed by electricity and power, right? That's the number 1 assumption. It remains decentralized and secure, which is a stark contrast to every other asset and currency on the planet. Assumption number 2, humans innovate into continually cheaper and more efficient space flight and productivity off planet, right? We assume that continues, and Starship seems to be this critical key piece, this key stepping stone, showing that assumption number 2 is true. Assumption number 3, humans and AIs follow the free market and monetize said most immutable ledger, which is Bitcoin, in terms of that energy. If you take those 3 assumptions, and assuming those 3 assumptions remain true in the next couple of decades, you literally might be able to fly to Mars and back, maybe 2040, 2060, 2080, whenever it is. You might be able to do that for the cost of a plane ticket. in 2024. The cost of this plane ticket today is over 1 million sats for me. Okay, this flight I'm taking in the past, which is now, is perhaps as expensive as this flight literally a million times farther distance in the future. This is the strange thing about productivity. This is the strange thing about Bitcoin. It really warps your perception, right? And again, it makes sense that the cost of hiring a donkey and a cart in ancient Rome is probably as expensive as me taking this flight today, even though the flight I'm driving a distance literally 10,000 times farther through technology that they couldn't possibly imagine. It's the same kind of concept. That one gold coin from the Roman days might have bought you that cart ride with the donkey. Okay, now it buys you a plane ticket. In the future, it'll be able to buy you Starship. Is it because the gold coin's getting more valuable? No. It's because more and more productivity is being shoved into that theoretical, 21 million gold coin standard. That's what we're looking at with Bitcoin here. And if we add the fourth assumption, that you watching this, hopefully, I cross my fingers, I pray, I hope you watching this live another 20, 30, 60 years with good health and, a long and prosperous life. If you live, a few more decades, then we can, if we add that fourth assumption, this might be you. Okay, that little guy on that image, if you live another 40, 50 years, that could be you. As long as, number one, Bitcoin remains decentralized and secure. Number two, humans continue to innovate into these new technologies. Number three, the humans and AIs follow the free market and do what's natural and monetize the thing worth monetizing. And number four, you live to see it. This could be you. Theoretically. The big question is, did you lose it? Okay, most people, I was having a conversation with the guy this morning. Again, like literally, I've already said, every week I'm talking to people, and on average, I'm seeing 10 to 30 coins are lost. Sometimes a single person will lose 50 coins or more, right? So, it's highly variable. In other weeks, not so much. But literally this morning, right before the airport, literally on the drive to the airport, I was talking to someone, and he lost 0.4. He lost 0.4, 40 million sats. Okay, I didn't say this to him, not because I'm going to rub it in, but in my head I was thinking, dang, I'm going to record this video at the airport, and that could potentially be 40 round-trip flights to Mars in 50 years. That's what he lost. You're not taking your custody serious enough. This is the problem I'm going to get at the end of the video. Okay, people tell themselves, oh, I don't need Bitcoin, I'll figure it out later. Okay, if you want to have a say in the future, you need Bitcoin. Okay, in 50 years, the AIs of the world might outnumber humans 10 to 1. What do humans need to survive? Oxygen. What do AIs need to survive? Electricity. What is the globally dominant ledger backed by electricity that we're going to price all that electricity within? Bitcoin. The AIs, they're going to be 10 billion people in the future. There's going to be 100 billion AIs in the future, and all those AIs are going to care about electricity as much as you care about oxygen. They're going to do everything they can to maximize the electric grid. They're going to do everything they can to get as much electricity as they can, because the more electricity they get, the more computational power they can get. The more computational power they get, the smarter they can get, the more economic advantage they can get, the more Bitcoin they can get, and Bitcoin is convertible for energy, right? AIs are going to demand Bitcoin. They're going to be paid in Bitcoin. They're going to pay in Bitcoin, or they're going to pay in the weakest currency possible, right? But eventually it's all going to be Bitcoin. But if you want to be intentionally ignorant and have their blinders on and say you don't need Bitcoin, I do believe that's going to be an incredibly expensive lesson for you, right? Likewise, a lot of people say, oh, I love Bitcoin, but ETF is safe-oo. My Bitcoin's okay on the exchanges, right? I'm okay with counterparty risk. I don't mind the fact that my exchange could be shut down by the government. I don't mind the fact that there's a CEO. I don't mind the fact they could be issuing paper Bitcoin, right? If you own the ETF, you have Coinbase to deal with, you have the U.S. government to deal with, you have the other financial institutions you have to deal with, right? You have war risk, you have other systemic risk, you have literally dozens of risks with the ETF that you don't have a self-custody Bitcoin. And all it takes is one of those risks for the whole thing to implode, okay? We're talking about rockets in this video. We're talking about Starship in this video, okay? I'm telling you, you only need one system to go wrong in the rocket for it to blow up in your face. And if you are so ignorant and naive and frankly foolish for holding a significant amount of your Bitcoin stack in an ETF or on an exchange, you're going to look up at the sky as your rocket ship takes off and you're going to watch it blow up. This is what I'm trying to tell you. You can say, oh, that will never happen, that will never happen, Bitcoin cycle is this, that, the other. You are looking at children's rockets. You're looking at rocket toys that people play with in their backyard. Those rockets are never going to reach orbit. I'm telling you, Starship is a different beast. It is going to reach orbit. And eventually, like this little diagram you're seeing on the screen here, where one day Bitcoin's going to go vertical, is because one day we reach escape velocity. All the rockets we've seen in the past, all the Bitcoin bull runs we've seen in the past, did not reach enough velocity, have enough momentum to achieve orbit. If you don't achieve orbit, you eventually come crashing back down to Earth. If you do achieve orbit, you circle the planet forever. That's what we're looking at with Bitcoin. One of these days, a government is going to print legal tender for Bitcoin, and price is going to rip and rip and rip and go up. And you're going to watch your Bitcoin that you worked so hard to stack go up and up and up in price. And because you were naive, because you were ignorant, because you tolerated the ETF, and because you tolerated counterparty risk, and because you tolerated the exchanges, you were going to lose it. Because at least one of those risks is going to manifest. Maybe it's a 6102 attack by the government. Maybe not that. Maybe just the exchange was offering paper Bitcoin. Maybe this, maybe that. Maybe you get, your dollar-denominated money back, but you don't get the actual Bitcoin balance back. Whatever it is, the ETF is not safe. You need self-custody. Don't ignore this, okay? The other concern people have is that they're too late. I'm telling you, you are not too late. 1 million Satoshis is a significant amount of Bitcoin. The guy I talked to this morning, he had 0.4 Bitcoin, and he lost it somehow years ago. He had it back in 2013. He was way earlier to Bitcoin than me, by years, right? But yeah, he lost it, and so I'm going to end up with way more coins than him, right? And again, 40 million sats potentially in a long enough time horizon could be easily 30 or 40 round trip to Mars, okay? And if you think you're too late to Bitcoin because you don't have $7 to rub together to buy a million sats, please, 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 whatever you do, get off zero. Just take some amount of political currency that you know is going away anyway, right? The dollar's not going to be around in 500 years, okay? Starship or its descendants are probably going to be around. Productivity is probably going to be around. And Bitcoin probably is going to be around. You are not too late to Bitcoin. You're at the very beginning, okay? And the last, this fourth little point here that I'm making, okay? If you're watching this and you're like, okay, I understand I need Bitcoin, number one. I understand the importance of self-custody. I'm not going to accept counterparty risk. I understand step 2. I understand step 3, that I'm not too late. Okay, step 4. If you are YOLOing all of your Bitcoin into single point of failure custody solutions, where you are the single point of failure for everything, maybe that means you have it all in one single SIG device. Respectfully, you're being naive. If you have it all in a couple different solutions with single point of failures, and all those single point of failures are you are being naive, and I'm saying that lovingly. Okay, I was there at 1.2 years ago, okay? I get it, right? If you have a single SIG, you're the single point of failure. If you lose your keys, it's gone. If someone convinces you, wrong, it's gone, right? Just last week, I was talking to someone. They had a 2 out of 3 multi-sig. They were still a single point of failure. They had 2 out of 3 keys in the multi-sig. They were scammed, okay? They lost it. It's gone. I'm sorry, it's true. You need some diversification to all kinds of custody solutions, right? If you're YOLOing 100% of your stack and a couple different self-custody setups where you remain the single point of failure in literally all of those setups, you have a huge problem. You can accept being the single point of failure for some of your custody setups. You should never accept being a single point of failure for all of your custody setups. The difference between losing half of your coins and all of your coins is a 10 times more painful experience, okay? Please, please, please take it from me. I've seen this anecdotally from hundreds of people in my time at the Bitcoin Advisor and talking with people on these calls, okay? Please understand, you need diversification of your Bitcoin self-custody. If you have 3 Bitcoin, you might literally have, what would that be, 300 round trips worth to Mars, worth of purchasing power in the future. Okay, you have a lot of money. And again, AIs might outnumber humans 10 to 1. Okay, the AIs are going to come after you. They're going to try to scam you. They're going to try to lie to you. They're going to try to convince you that they're your family members. Okay, you have the fake calls with voices that kind of sound like humans. It's going to get a lot worse. The scammers are going to get worse. The criminals are going to get worse. And if you have any amount of significant Bitcoin, whether it's 0.3 coins or 3 coins or 30 coins, whatever it is, I don't care. You have to take these things seriously. You want to be early in Bitcoin. You want to be early and get rich in Bitcoin. You have to accept responsibility that I understand the AIs are going to come after me. I understand the criminals are going to come after me. I have to do everything I can to protect myself against taxes, against improper inheritance planning, against $5 wrench attacks, against phishing attacks, SIM card swaps, UTXO management, on and on and on, okay? What am I getting at? What's going to happen, like this little chart diagram I've laid out here, is that Bitcoin goes up and up and up and up, and people procrastinate these things, they procrastinate these things, they procrastinate these things. They don't get the multi-sig vaults. They don't get the inheritance plan vaults. And then they're going to wake up one day and realize, oh, crap. I'm up 50x in nominal terms on my Bitcoin. Why did I procrastinate this? I better figure all of this out right now, but I have no time left. And everyone that could have helped is now way too expensive, okay? I mean, you gotta seriously think about this, okay? There's maybe 1,000 people like me in the world doing the kind of work I'm doing, right, that are doing this professionally, right? I was the first person in America. I was the first American at the Bitcoin Advisor, right? We've been providing service for clients, since 2018 for multi-sig, since 2016 for single sig, right? We've been doing this for years. I was the first American at the company. And I'm telling you, there's maybe 1,000 people on the planet, both at, our company's expanding quite quickly now. We actually got over 40 people now, which a lot of people outside can't believe, but I'm telling you, like, people don't understand how quickly people are going to realize they need this. And what do you think is going to happen when there's 100,000 people demanding this service, demanding these, multi-sig vaults, demanding the inheritance planning, demanding the UXTXO planning, all these things? If there's 100,000 people currently in the space that need this, and there's only 1,000 people that can provide it, or that currently have the education, the experience to provide it, like, what do you think is going to happen when those 100,000 people chase those 1,000? And oh, by the way, we have the next 1 million adopters in the next 5 to 8 years. Like, you got to take care of these things now. If you procrastinate them like everyone else, you're going to pay the price. And what's going to happen is that people are going to wake up and they realize, oh crap, I was going to do this for free on my own, but it's going to take 500 hours to do, and now I don't have the time because it keeps going up and up. I was up 30x, now I'm up 40x, now I'm up 50x, now I'm up 60x, right? And likewise, if you don't want to do it on your own, but you want to hire someone, it's going to be too expensive because everyone else that also procrastinated along with you is going to have to be dealing with this problem, right? And this is what I think most people don't understand, is that they put it off, and they're scared of price going down. They're scared of a crash. They're scared of, whatever it is, right? That's what they're terrified of. But I think what they actually should be concerned about, what I think they actually should be terrified of, is the reality that what if max pain is up, right? If I was the U.S. government, what would I do? What I would do is, to stimulate demand for my bonds, what I would do is I would just start printing political currency and backing the bonds with the coins that I'm buying, and make my debt more valuable that way, right? That's the way to do it. And if you're doing that, your attack vector, your attack mechanism is forcing price up. Which actually, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense, because what does the government have power to do? Does the government have power to force price down? Maybe they do, but the government has a money printer. Like, use it, right? That's what they're going to do. Like, when the government attacks Bitcoin, what if their attack on Bitcoin is not having price crash 40%? What if it's having price go up 4,000%, right? And so, if you have, let's say, $50,000 of Bitcoin and these subpar custody solutions, I mean, what's going to happen when that suddenly goes to $4 million or $40 million a coin? Like, seriously, like, have you thought about your tax situation? Do you have your trusts down? Like, that's going to be a really hefty tax bill if you don't prepare now, right? The higher it goes, the higher your tax bill, right? I mean, or how are you going to protect against taxes, right? I mean, your estate plan, or people coming after you, $5 reg tax, all these things. The AI is coming after you. It's like, you want to be early, but the more early you are and the more bullish you are, the more obsessive you should be about self-custody. Okay, I'm one of the most bullish people, most optimistic people in the entire Bitcoin nerd space, right? Like, why do you think I'm so obsessive about talking about self-custody? Why do you think I'm so obsessive about talking about multi-sig cloud or custody vaults? Why do you think I'm so obsessive about talking about Bitcoin Advisor? It's because I believe and understand that the attack vector is not manipulate Bitcoin price down for a couple years. No, it's force price up forever via the political currency printer. Because if you're a government, you understand, if we don't do that, if we don't print our political currency into oblivion and just buy Bitcoin, right? And CPI doesn't have to hyperinflate, by the way, for that to happen. But if I was the government to do that, like, I want to do that now because I see where the puck is moving. I see where things are going, right? And so, to give a little bit more context of what specifically I'm talking about, this is exactly what I'm talking about, this chart here. You should have, I believe, the vast majority of people should have a portion of their coins in do-it-yourself, self-directed, single point of failure wallets, right? Just like they have, right? If you, but there are certain ways to do that. There are other ways to do it. Ledger is crap. Other hardware wallets are crap, right? Whatever you do, you're probably going to have some like that. But you should probably have another portion, another stack somewhere in a professional zero single point of failure vault, including you not being the single point of failure, okay? If you have a multi-custody vault and you have all three keys, you are still a single point of failure. If you have a multi-sig vault and you have two of the keys, you are still a single point of failure, okay? If you give out two keys, to Uncle Jim and to Aunt May or whatever, right, and they mismanage them, that's a single point of failure. Like, there are all kinds of single point of failures I do not believe people are considering. And this is why I talk about this. It is critical. You have exposure to both. You need exposure to both. That way, if this goes wrong, you're safe. If that goes wrong, you're also safe. If this goes wrong, if that goes wrong, no matter what happens, whether it's a jurisdictional problem, whether it's a scamming problem or a theft problem, whatever it is, at the end of the day, you are not going to be reset back to a Bitcoin stack of zero. Maybe you lose half, maybe you lose a third of it. Whatever you do, you're not going to lose all of your coins. This is why I encourage custody diversification. You need it, you need it, you need it. I'm going to say it until my face is blue. I'm trying, but I know a lot of people are not taking this seriously. And just like that little diagram I showed before, you're not going to take it seriously until Bitcoin's price has gone up so much you are forced to take it seriously. So please, if you found this conversation interesting, if you found this little pitch at the end important, please look at the QR code on the screen, and keep in mind, if you tolerate subpar custody storage for your coins, you are not bullish enough. You hold one Bitcoin, okay? You hold one of these magical golden coins from the Roman Empire. If you hold that coin long enough, you're going to upgrade from donkeys and carriages all the way up to the iPhone that's in my hand and the airport that I'm sitting in, right? Okay, you're going to upgrade from the ancient world to the modern world. You're going to upgrade from the ancient world where we cut down trees and force species to go extinct to get our mere 3,000 tons of gold production a year. We're going to hyper accelerate in the next couple decades or century or so into the world where we mine off planet to where we have 10 times, 100 times the productivity, 10 times, 100 times the people going to the moon, 1,000 times the people going to the moon, an infinite number of more people going to Mars, right? The future is really bright as long as you buy Bitcoin and you hold it properly and you diversify your custody, right? Okay, my email is on the screen here. You can email me. The faster way, though, to get a hold of me is via the QR code than an email. But basically what I do is I help clients lower the custody risk, therefore help them justify a higher Bitcoin allocation. I help them on buying more Bitcoin via maximizing tax, inheritance, self-custody, and UTXO and cycle strategy, right? The fastest way to get more coins is to hire somebody and pay them as a function of how much Bitcoin you stack and keep, right? Our incentive at the Bitcoin Advisor is to help clients get as much coins as possible, right? This is the difference between a product and a service. We help people stack as much coin as possible, right? Whether that's minimizing taxes. I mean, seriously, divorce, tax planning, inheritance planning, this and that, the other. Again, I talk to people all the time. They screw one thing up. Maybe they got their self-custody down, but they screwed their tax planning up. Maybe they got their self-custody down, maybe they got their tax planning down, but they screwed up their UTXOs. Maybe they got the UTXOs down, that down, but they screwed up some part of jurisdictional arbitrage, this, that, the other, right? There are literally dozens of ways in which you can lose all or a significant number of your coins, right? And by hiring somebody to help you walk through all of these things and make sure you have your risk down as low as possible, that, in my opinion, is essential for all people to do, again, with at least a portion. Not the whole stack, not all of it, but at least a third, or a 10%, or 50%, or 80%, or whatever you need. Please, 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 get off zero when it comes to Bitcoin, and get off zero when it comes to diversifying your self-custody solutions. Because if you have it all in one single point of failure, including if that single point of failure is you, there's an exponential amount of productivity ahead, and therefore an exponential number of threats coming your way from the AI bot scammers, from human scammers, and from other forms of productivity that are more and more efficiently going to find ways to take your coins. If you tolerate subpar custody storage, you are not bullish enough. If you appreciate this video, if you appreciate the discussion, please like, subscribe, all that wonderful stuff in the comments below. It really helps this content get to more people, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.